In this demonstration, I'll be installing the macOS. Now, normally this is pre-installed on a Mac device. However, if you need to do the installation from the installation media, such as from an ISO file or some kind of USB startup disk, you can go ahead and follow through these steps to get the macOS up and running once again. Okay, the first question I'm asked relates to the language selection. I'm going to leave it on English, and I'll click the arrow in the bottom right to continue through the installation. So from here, I'm given the option to restore from Time Machine, so a previous system backup, or I can do an installation, install macOS Big Sur. I can also use the Safari web browser to get help, or I can run the disk utility to prepare the disk to install the macOS on, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to click on disk utility, and I'll click continue. That opens up the disk utility where what I want to do is select my disk device over on the left, and at the top center, I'll click erase. I want to erase the device. Maybe I'll just call this the boot device. It's going to be formatted using the Apple file system, APFS, and I'm going to leave it as a GUID partition table type of disk as opposed to a master boot record or an Apple partition map. So I'll go ahead and click erase. So once it's been formatted with the Apple file system, then I can proceed with the OS installation. So I'm going to go ahead and click done, and I'm going to click on disk utility up in the menu in the upper left and choose quit disk utility. Now that'll give me the option then to continue with the installation of the macOS. So I'm going to choose that option, and then I'll click continue. I'll click continue yet again, and I will click agree to the software license terms. And there's my boot disk that we just prepared for the installation of the macOS. I'm going to select it and choose continue to install the macOS on that disk. And at this point, it's copying files. And once the macOS starts up again, we'll go ahead and continue with the installation. So I'm going to go ahead and specify my country or region, and then I'll go ahead and click continue. I'll accept the default for the written and spoken languages screen, so I'll click continue. And I'll choose not now on the accessibility screen. And I'll click continue on the data and privacy screen. I'm then asked if I want to transfer my information from either an existing Mac or perhaps a Time Machine backup, but I'm going to choose not now. I can also migrate data from a Windows PC. So I'll just click not now in the bottom left. Now you can navigate in a web browser to appleid.apple.com to create a new Apple ID, which I've done. And once you're signed in, you'll see the same type of things that I've got here. So you've got some sign-in security options, personal information, payment methods, family sharing, devices, and so on. Currently, if I go to devices, there are no devices listed. So I'm just going to go ahead and click not now. I'm then asked if I want to sign in with my Apple ID. I could choose to specify my existing Apple ID email address and password, given that I have network connectivity, or I could create a new Apple ID. There's even a link here if I have forgotten my Apple ID or password. But for now, I'm just going to choose set up later in the bottom left. I get a little warning message that says, "Are you sure you want to continue without an Apple ID specified?" Because that's your link to the Apple App Store, to iCloud, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and just click skip, and I will agree to the terms and conditions for the macOS, and I'll click the agree button, and then I have to create a computer account for this machine. So I'll go ahead and fill out those details now. And then I'll go ahead and click continue. I'll just continue through the wizard, accepting the default selections. So I don't want the Siri personal assistant to store any voice dictation details, so I'll choose not now, and I'll click continue, and I'll just continue on through the wizard, accepting the installation defaults, to the point where I get to the screen where it says setting up your Mac. Of course, when you install a new operating system from the installation source media, you should probably check to make sure that you've got the latest OS software updates that have been applied. You might also have an option to upgrade to a newer version of the OS, as I do here for macOS Monterey. Okay, so now we've got a functional installation of the macOS where we've got our Apple menu up at the top. We can go into our Finder to start working with the file system. Of course, we've got some stat icons over in the upper right, such as the date and the time, and also the option to connect to a Wi-Fi network. And down below, we've got our menu bar with a number of our apps. So if I were to click on the Wi-Fi icon up in the upper right and then choose Network Preferences, I also have my Ethernet interface, which is currently connected to a network. And on the right, I have an IP address that's configured for DHCP. So I can go ahead and just close this out. I'll just click the red button here, which is like the equivalent of the X in the upper right of a Windows dialog box. And down in my chooser area at the bottom, I could also click the App Store icon if I wanted to visit the Apple App Store. So I could go ahead and click on Continue. And from here, I could choose any apps I want to install on my macOS.